guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, HOA called the police on me for having a wheelchair-accessible RV in my driveway and towed it away. I sued them for $265,000. Hey Reddit. I'll just use this subreddit to vent about my awful homeowner association. To set the scene, I am a single father to my lovely daughter Rachel, 26 years old. In March, Rachel was involved in a terrible automobile accident on the highway that left her in the hospital for 2 weeks. Luckily, she made a fast recovery but did become wheelchair-bound following that accident, losing the use of her legs. To help support her following the accident, she moved back into the old family home and I took out a huge chunk of my savings for an RV with wheelchair access so that she was not housebound. The RV was a behemoth of a vehicle, barely fitting on my driveway safely, but I did my due diligence to check this before I committed to a purchase. The last thing I wanted was anyone to complain. Meet Richard Dawkins, a close neighbor and well-liked member of the community. Following a short campaign last year, we supported him in becoming the latest president of the HOA that governed our neighborhood, and we were thrilled for him. Since then, life had been good except for now. One morning as I was mowing the lawn, I noticed Richard stroll past before suddenly stopping and whipping his head back around like a paranoid owl, complete with wide bulging eyes. I walked over to meet him, but his eyes remained glued to the driveway's new addition. I could tell he was not happy. While his manner was overtly friendly like the nice old man I knew when he asked me to move the RV, I could see a deep seriousness in his eyes. Despite this, I explained the new situation with my daughter and promised to keep it out of the way as much I could, but this was going to have to stay. A week passed peacefully before the notices starting come in. Each morning the mailbox gifted me a notice from the HOA with a small fine for public obstruction. While I was confused, there was nothing that stood out more than the RV, so I knew that was the issue. It took a few days before I could organize a meeting to discuss the issue, in which time the notices had continued to pile up and I collected them as receipts for later. The HOA board members were very understanding to my plight, explaining ignorance at the fine, citing that Richard sanctioned them before going on vacation. In his absence they were hesitant to act to undo the notices, but they promised no more would be sent until he returned. I was alerted by the end of his vacation with a new notice that he delivered, personally voicing outrage that I was breaking the rules and refusing to pay HOA fines, promising further punishment if I did not comply. I shut the door on him when he refused to reason. 2 hours later we were interrupted during dinner by a persistent and forceful banging on the door. Alarmed, I jumped out of my chair to investigate. I opened the door to 2 apprehensive officers of the law, eyes darting around me to inspect the house. They explained they had an anonymous phone call about strange noises from the RV and asked if they could take a look around. At this point a small crowd of onlookers gathered by the pavement, Richard among them, trying but failing to remain hidden. After an awkward few minutes as I stood in the public eye while waiting for the police to finish their search, they concluded that everything was above board. One even complimented the RV as they were leaving. This prompted Richard to push through the crowd and accost us from across the yard, demanding the RV be removed from the driveway. He was difficult to calm down, but at the end of their patience the officer's threat of arrest seemed to do the trick and he stormed off back home. This seemed to only mark the start of a campaign of hatred and shaming Richard started against me, trying to turn my friends and neighbors against me so that he could democratically sway his authority into forcing the RV or my family out of the neighborhood. While he did fail at this, he did manage to succeed in traumatizing our family over the next few weeks since the campaign started, effectively alienating us and reducing me to seek to medication to deal with the newly found stress and anxiety, a medication I am still on today. Like a kettle at the end of its cycle, with each passing day I could see Richard was coming closer and closer to his boiling point, and I began to have doubts. Was I the issue? Should we move? That was all put behind me, however, by his last act of trickery and malice. My daughter brought to me an idea for an abrupt road trip with the RV. She had taken the whole situation very hard as well, and I expected she was just as eager to get away. With no qualms I agreed, and we left for roads unknown, and had a blast. It was not until coming home the late Sunday evening that we discovered something was horribly wrong. This was first hinted to us early by a plume of smoke camouflaged against the onset darkness and a pulsing orange glow peeking over the neighborhood. Rounding the corner, I found the source of the light was our front yard, which currently emitted an intense heat as it burned out of control. At this point I could already hear the distant sirens reacting to a neighbor's call, but I was left dumbstruck to the chaos, left only able to stand and watch in horror. After the firefighters were able to wrestle it into submission, we found that much of the yard and surrounding fencing had been destroyed, as well as my spare pickup which I had parked in our driveway while we were away. I subsequently had to fork out a lot more of my savings to repair the yard and now manage the added hassle of being one car short in daily life. When I woke the next morning to find my RV gone completely, I think a switch flipped in my brain. Although no witnesses to the fire were spotted, I knew without any doubt there was only one person that had the motive, and I was sure now was no different. I marched over to his house and demanded that he return the RV at once. With a disgusting smugness he directed me to a local impound and said he had been considerate in moving it in case the yard fire magically restarted. He said with a twinkle in his eye. I told him I was calling the cops and began dialing them as I walked home, with Richard quickly on my heels. Richard had finally crossed the line, but luckily for me that also meant he could now be held accountable for his actions. I called the police when I got home and reported it stolen. Despite Richard's claims to try and de-escalate the situation, I slammed the door on him and left him panicking on my front porch. Following a humiliating court case for Richard and the HOA, they were ordered to pay the damages in full, all $265,000 of sweet justice. In the aftermath, Richard was promptly removed from his position of authority, and he ended up moving out of the neighborhood sometime later. Good riddance. The next story is titled, "Our new neighbors are removing and building things along our shared property line without notifying us first. We have lived in our house for about a year and a half now, and almost 3 months ago we got new neighbors behind us. We haven't really talked to them other than once when my husband spoke to the guy for about 10 minutes. The guy mentioned in the conversation they were going to be putting up a fence in the future. Other than that, just our children have interacted with theirs. About 2 weeks ago we woke up to all the trees on the property line removed or in the process of being removed. It was about 8 huge privacy trees. We went out and said something to the guys cutting down the trees and asked them to stop because most if not all the trees are on the property line and we didn't consent to this. The homeowner wasn't home, but the contractors told us they were only cutting them down up to our fence. Which is not the property line. The property line extends beyond our fence 5 to 12 inches. Our property line in the back is diagonal and so it extends farther beyond our fence in some points than others. We requested permit records soon after because a permit with a detailed survey is required in our town to do this, so it should have been noted that it was a property line. Then last week they put up a fence. The fence is over the property line on all but about a foot of the fence. We got the permit records back the day after the fence was installed, and there were no permits, open or closed, on this property for this work. We do have a survey, which is how we found the property line. It was done by the previous homeowners, but we were told when buying that since the survey had the iron pin said it was valid and we didn't need a new one unless we wanted it. We don't want to start conflict with neighbors, but also are not happy they are not respecting our property. Is this something worth reporting to the local code officials or would you just ignore it? I'm worried maybe we are being petty and will have to live behind people we upset and started conflict with. I'm also upset because our yard along the fence line is covered in mounds of dirt from their fence. I saw the guy outside yesterday and yelled over to him about there being dirt in our yard, and he just said, "Oh sorry about that," and walked inside. The next story is titled, "Destroying a Neighborhood Using Right to Light Laws." New tenant moves in just before summer and clears all the trees out of their garden. Frustrating as the area has quite a few trees, give privacy from the houses along the row and the ones on the back. Plus, there are many birds in the gardens in this area that nest in all the trees: robins, blue tits, coal tits, sparrows, and recently some goldfinches have set up. However, since they moved in they have been on a crusade using right to light laws, and the council has sent enforcement notices to 5 properties, 2 either side and 3 at the back. We are 1 at the side and our garden goes along the length of the road. None of us want trees removing or had any problems until this person moved in. The previous owners and landlord of that property were also fine. Today though 2 of the properties have had the tree surgeons in, and what was a nice leafy area with trees and birds is now wide open and desolate. We can now see into the gardens and windows of the properties opposite and down the row. Our landlord is also in the process of removing the hedge and tree on the property boundary by the road, meaning we no longer have any shade or tree cover, and what was a secure boundary is now easily able to jump the fence. The character has been completely destroyed of the area. We won't have the nesting birds we have always had, and the kicker, the tenant has been accepted onto the new build estate as part of the housing association, so she won't even be in the property come the end of this summer. Most of us proposed options such as thinning or crowning, as we are not monsters and we accept that trees can cast shadow, but they were ignored, and the council slapped a 6-foot order on everything, essentially killing the tree, so they have had to go. Really annoyed, as we really loved this area and the birdsong in the morning and the dapple's shade we got and the privacy. It's galling that one person can destroy an area and then move on. In an age where we need to respect nature, it's brutal seeing it all hacked away because someone wants to sunbathe. The next story is titled, "How much water do you want, exactly?" TL. Dr. Customer chooses to ignore simple procedure and receives 800 gallons of water in their living room. I deliver bulk water to people who don't have access to city water or their own private well. For nearly all customers it's a simple process, either they call for deliveries, or they have agreed to automatic deliveries. When I show up, I hook the truck up to the fill pipe and start pumping, and either listen at the vent or hook up to an installed alarm in order to know when the holding tank is full. This particular customer had their holding tank installed in a small utility room next to their living room and didn't install a vent to the outside, and refused to allow us to install an alarm because they didn't want us to put the 1/4 inch hole in the wall to run the alarm wire. Solution? They call when they need 2,000 gallons of water, and we show up and pump exactly 2,000 gallons of water. This procedure worked without flaw for over a decade. Literally hundreds of deliveries with no issue. Owner deciding to sell. We are contacted by the new owners and set them up as a new account and head over for our first delivery and meeting. We especially go over the issue with us being totally unable to tell when the tank is full. We offered to install the alarm again for free, but they declined. So, we let them know when they call for water, they must be sure they have enough room in the tank for 2,000 gallons. Or to let us know how much water they have room for. We went over this several times and they laughed, saying they understood and would be calling when they were below the 2,000 gallon mark. 2 weeks go by, and we receive a message on our answering machine from the new customer, no gallon amount is specified. This set off a warning bell though, because it was a household of 2, and it's only been 2 weeks since we filled them last. That's highly abnormal. We expected more like 5 weeks. So, we call back just to double check. No answer, so we leave a message asking for confirmation. Couple hours later we try again. By the next day we had left 4 messages asking to confirm that they were ready for a full load. No reply. Well, they did call, so boss sends me out. I knock on door as a last attempt. Still no answer, so I hook up, start the pump and set the timer so I don't over pump while reading my book. 15 minutes later I hop out to check the water meter, 1,700 gallons. I'll watch for the next couple minutes and shut it down. That's when I hear the front door burst open and the woman who bought the house and had called us in yesterday is screaming to shut the water down. There is water everywhere. What the hell are we doing? This woman has been ignoring our calls and even ignored me at her door, and now she is screaming at me. Apparently, she had called when the tank was half full instead of down below the mark showing where the 2,000 gallons is. And just disregarded all our messages and didn't feel like talking to me when I knocked. So now she has 700 plus gallons of water in her living room. Boss was called out so she could scream at him. Husband came home from work so he too could scream at us. For reasons, I guess. They made a lot of demands about how we were going to pay to fix it. Nope. Boss laid down how we saw the situation. You can keep the water free of charge, just don't call us for water anymore. Y'all are too stupid to work with. Never heard from them again. Lol, broken heart. The last story is titled, Shiny Floors. In the early 2000s, I was a floor installer for new homes. One of the floors we installed was sheet vinyl. Most of the homes by us are built on concrete slabs. Before the vinyl can be installed, we prep the concrete for holes, cracks and other irregularities. Most of the time it takes 30 minutes to prep. Anything over that is an extra charge to the builder. This year the vinyl manufacturers came out with a new vinyl floor that was very smooth with little texture on it. That means it shows every imperfection in the concrete. We started to get complaints from the new homeowners about high spots, low spots in the concrete showing through the vinyl. Long story short, the builder blames us and wants us to replace the floor for free, to make the homeowners happy. We explained that the concrete is the problem, and we did not pour the concrete. He said it's our problem once we install the floor. Okay then, the next day I go to my next home, spending an extra hour with a 10 feet level, making every imperfection I can find. I ask the builder how he wants to fix the floor. He tells me to prep it. I have him sign my work order giving me permission to charge extra for prepping the concrete. We charged $150 hour to prep in those days, much more now. I spent all day prepping the concrete. Later that afternoon the builder stopped by, wondering why I was still there. I told him if I was going to be responsible for the concrete, I was going to make sure it was right. I came back the next day and spent another 4 hours prepping before going to the builder. I told him I believe it's ready for vinyl, but I need him to inspect it in case I missed anything. He walked over to the house and saw all what I did to the floor. I told him if it's to his expectations, he needs to sign my work order stating he approves the prep work, and I can install my vinyl. He realized I turned the tables on him and reluctantly signed my work order. I got paid over 12 hours of prep at $150 per hour. We never got stuck replacing another floor for free ever again. Thank you for listening.